Welcome to Things You Don't Know, the podcast that brings little known facts about well known people, little known people and their contributions, and events that shed light on cultures. And sometimes, yeah, we just seek to entertain. You know, when Dr. Deneen and I were considering trying to find a podcast that we could publish quickly, he says, "Well, what can we do?" And we discussed a number of different things. And I was kind of looking around. And I said, "Oh, I got an idea." And I came up with an idea that my dear friend was a bit shocked at, actually. He worried that some people might be offended by the topic. I learned to pay attention when he says things like that because with my background in medical issues and working with people in a very personal and in-depth way, it's kind of desensitized me on many subjects. But we decided to forge ahead anyhow. So, what is this topic? Well, I'm 99% sure that every person or people in the USA see or come into contact with this item on a daily basis. Yet, most have no idea of the history or the cultural differences, particular to this topic, I have around the world. Today, we tend to call this item toilet paper, or sometimes TP. Before the 1970s, TP was called a lot of different things, like bathroom tissue, necessary paper, wet paper, or even after dinner paper. That's kind of my favorite. That was mainly in the southern United States. In the 70s, that was the first time that television ads actually talked about toilet paper. So it's kind of interesting. Don't you think, Dr. Name?
Indeed, I was somewhat surprised that it's used for many other hygienic purposes in addition to cleaning the anus after defecating. Some people blow their nose with it, tend to different kinds of bodily discharges. Some women clean their reproductive areas with it after sex. But 70% of the world doesn't use it. So what do they use to be clean?
Well, you're exactly right. And our investigation into this kind of yielded some surprising information to me. Throughout the centuries, many different methods were used. The particular method chosen depended on the area. Like, for example, in Europe, bidets are used to clean the anus as they are seen as more hygienic. Now, what is a bidet? It's a little stream of water. Okay, so you actually rinse your behind. Australia uses them with toilet paper. And so, in other words, you would use the bidet and clean yourself off and then sort of pat yourself dry. Now, it's kind of different in different cultures. Like, say, for example, in France. All right. Now, when I was there in 1965, I was kind of shocked and surprised because you go along the street in Paris, this beautiful city, right? And there are these little stands, and I didn't really know what they were. Okay, but they have these little walls that cover like from your knees to like your chest. All right, and you know, discovered that those were public restrooms. Okay, now you go into one of these facilities and you look around to see a toilet. Well, there isn't one. There's a hole. Can you imagine, Dr. Dean? There's a hole there that you're supposed to do your business in, right?
I wouldn't want to have to, with my disability, try to get near one of those, to be honest.
Yeah. The other thing that's really weird is, okay, you could be taking a pee and talking to your friend on the other side of the enclosure. Because, like I say, it didn't cover you, at least at that time. So you could carry on a conversation while you're doing your thing, which I thought was just very strange, but they thought it was nice, I guess. I don't know. So,
There have been some really bizarre things people have used. The ancient Romans used a sponge for the rectum that was soaked in vinegar and salt.
mm, and they shared that too. In other words, they would do their business, clean off with the sponge on a stick, which is what it really was. It was kind of on a stick. Look down below, you'll see the picture. Anyhow, they would do that, and then they would put it back in this bucket with this vinegar salt solution, and the next guy would come in and use it again.
I don't want to think about the levels of infection.
Indeed. And then Asian people, sometimes they would bathe in a river. People in the Middle East might use sand. Mongolians and Africans might use grass and leaves. Polynesians, this just seems so strange to me. They would use seashells, or other people would use pottery shards. Pottery shards, yeah. It just seems a little rough on my behind for my taste, I think. But they would scrape off, and then obviously those shells could be rinsed off and reused. Again, yuck. Anyhow, Europeans might, in the 16th century, they might use cheap books. In Romania, public outhouses and towns within them were taxed in the 16th century. Hey, check out the Dracula podcast to learn more about some of that kind of thing.
One thing that really intrigued me is that our early colonial settlers learned from the indigenous peoples to use corn cobs. If you want to know more about corn, we have a popcorn podcast you really get a kick out of.
Oh, indeed, yes. And in some places, and if you run out of toilet paper in some places, you might still find people using corn cobs and reusing them too sometimes. So anyhow, the Chinese, well, they kind of were in the vanguard of some of this stuff. They invented paper to be used for cleaning. Okay. And they produced tons of this paper for the imperial court in the 1300s. Then, about 3 centuries later, they added a little bit of perfume. I can understand that. Central Americans often make toilet paper out of hemp, or they use hemp extracts or hemp things to do it with. And Dr. Neen, you had something interesting about vending machines.
I couldn't believe this, but in Japan, Malaysia, and certain parts of Eastern Europe, you can buy TP in a vending machine with your favorite scent on it.
Okay.
This is a very profitable business. For example, the toilet paper concession for the Hajj, the pilgrimage in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, was given to the brother-in-law of Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince and the chairman of the Economic Development Council. That particular contract is worth 100 million Saudi riyals, which is $27 million.
Wowzer, wowzer. When we're talking about Arabic nations, it's very interesting. Many of the Arabs do not use toilet paper, right?
Indeed, there are specific instructions in the Hadith, the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, to clean oneself before and after prayer. So they would either bathe in a river if they could do so, or use sand and other ointments where there isn't enough water.
And they're very specific about you use your left hand to wipe yourself, to wipe your behind. Okay. And then you wash your hands afterwards, obviously. And you were telling me something about that having to do with the punishment about.
Oh, yes. During the Middle Ages, there were extremely draconian, strict laws, and persistent thieves were often punished with amputation. And the right hand was amputated because people in feudal villages would eat from a communal pot sometimes. And because you did use your left hand to toilet yourself, it was considered unclean to eat with that hand. So people who had lost their right hand through the punishment would have to eke out a subsistence by themselves because they were no longer allowed to make use of the local collective food stores.
Yeah, certainly a way to put a hurting on you for life. Now, in Greece, they have a really interesting thing. They leave what they call grave goods at the burial site of a deceased, and that includes their favorite drink, their favorite brand of toilet paper on the anniversary of their death. I think that's kind of nice in a way.
It is. It shows they're being remembered by the survivors. Now, what really intrigued me, if I may say so, is how we get the toilet paper we know today. A man in the United Kingdom named Joseph Gayetty invented it in the early 1860s. He put Vaseline and other ointments on it as a form of medication.
That came a little later, though, right? He had the paper, and he put his name and his logo on each sheet, and then as it became more popularized in the 1870s, or around that time, late 1860s, he used medication, i.e., Vaseline, and promoted it as a way to avoid hemorrhoids.
Something nobody would want to deal with if they could avoid it.
Yeah, I got that one right. And then you were going to say something about Imperial Germany.
Oh, yes. Toilet paper became very popularized in Imperial Germany, the so-called Second Reich, because it was included in the travel packs given to imperial officials serving in the African Empire of Germany in Namibia and Togo. In the early 1900s, European department stores offered free toilet paper to customers that purchased glassware. This is the funniest thing I've heard in the series of events like this. Kaiser Wilhelm I sent a case of what was called water paper as a Christmas present to Chancellor Otto von Bismarck in 1878. I can think of many things I'd rather have as a Christmas gift than toilet paper.
Well, it depends. If you couldn't get it, you probably would want it, you know. But yeah, the other interesting thing about this is, okay, around about this time, hotels started having indoor plumbing that was useful and usable. And they started using toilet paper in those hotels. People started associating that with the good life, if you will. And that, plus the fact that we started changing, we started not using outhouses so much, and we had indoor plumbing in our homes. So people said, if we're going to have indoor plumbing, then we should have, this fancy toilet paper. And they did. And, the things that they went through, fascinating to me, like the splinter-free paper. Well, actually, it was probably an advertising ploy. This was in the 1930s. They said, we have this splinter-free paper. They also, the Scott Paper Company, they had different names for each color of toilet paper.
I think they didn't want to admit openly they were selling it, so they would create little front companies and give each type of paper a different name from a different company.
And they had a whole business about 1-ply, 2-ply, 3-ply, 4-ply, but 2-ply is the most popular and water soluble. And I can tell you from personal experience that one ply toilet paper is just not a good thing. It's just not very stable. Now, in a lot of places, they started coming up with some interesting kind of advertising concepts, like using basically kind of feminine terminologies, like soft touch, soothing clean, in Malaysia, for example. Beloved embrace tissues were designed to link toilet paper with the nurturing touch of a girlfriend. That just seems weird to me in the sense that I really don't want my girlfriend, wiping my butt. Sorry. That just doesn't seem like a thing for me.
Yeah, that's a bit beyond the pale. One of the things that really surprised me was when the Scott Company started putting out colored TP, and they're the only company in the world that still makes it.
Yeah, they still make pink, green, yellow, blue, and in Canada, red tissues. I think that's cool.
When Vice President, as he then was, Nixon had his big debate with Soviet leader Khrushchev in Moscow, Khrushchev said that one of the reasons it proved that Americans were so decadent and soft is we had multiple colors of toilet
Okay,
paper.
well, okay, so hotels got it and then started getting into the American homes. And then our great pastime of American sports. The sports teams sometimes printed logos of their rivals, their predominant rivals, like the Yankees and the Mets. So if you were a Yankees fan, you would get toilet paper with the Mets on it. Wipers, yeah.
The other way around, yep.
I'm a Washington fan. Don't like it. It's your own problem. It's a real big time rivalry. Anyhow, yeah, I have done my due diligence and besmirched the Cowboys with yeah, flushing them down the toilet and enjoyed it. The Detroit Pistons, the Chicago Bulls. I mean, we could go on and on. Another interesting thing happened in our stream of history here, and this was caused by Johnny Carson.
Oh, yes. He made a joke in 1973 about his local supermarket being out of toilet paper, and it created a
Yes,
nationwide panic. Shows what kind of influence he had. But unfortunately, in times of crisis, there is hoarding of toilet paper and real shortages. We saw that in the second oil crisis in 1979 and early 1980, and then during the first half of the COVID epidemic in 2020 and 2021.
indeed.
What I found amusingly interesting is that many television shows have had themes about toilet paper or discussed it. Archie Bunker in the wonderful drama All in the Family would talk about his great admiration for President Nixon, and he would sometimes end his conversation by saying, Edith brought a toilet paper, which was pronounced turlet in his Brooklynese accent. More recently, South Park discussed America's fascination for toilet paper at the expense of other cleaning methods by linking it with the ban on cannabis, and this unspoken, hidden, but vital product plays a very important part in our health, and one could also say in our progress.
Right. Now, other cultures, as we've already discussed, really feel that their hygienic purposes are served better with actually washing, like with a bidet, and then drying off. And they may be right about that because the bidet is somewhat catching on in the United States. It is really interesting, though, how we look at all this. For the longest time, when they advertised toilet paper on TV, they didn't use the term toilet paper. They used all these other terms. It was like you can't talk about it because it's sort of a nasty thing. But I don't think it's really nasty. at all. I think it's interesting. And yes, well, hopefully you have enjoyed this exploration into the history of TP and that you were not too shocked by the discussion. That's a joke, folks.
Once again, folks, we found things that are part of our everyday lives can have a convoluted but very interesting history. I think this is another example of what we call boots on the ground history. It shows how important it is to become aware of facts about our world, to not get all your information from books, vital as though that is, but from real life experience. It's also, on a personal note, folks, if any of you are ever going to travel internationally, it really is a good idea to check out customs and even something as basic as toileting facilities.
You know, Dr. Deneen, if you folks don't know, is hoping to be going on a rather extensive amount of travels to other places to gather some more research. He's always sticking his nose into stuff and trying to figure out stuff and learn things. And I don't say that in a denigrating manner. I love it that he does that.
It's my one vice, folks.
No, it isn't. Lime Coke is your vice.
You're right about that.
But anyhow, when he was doing some of the planning and plotting out, I said, you need to check out customs and toileting facilities.
And you were spot on. I mean, as a wheelchair user, not that I can't adjust to different things. Of course I can, but it takes some thinking. And it's good to have some idea of what the lay of the land is before you go somewhere.
You got that one right, Bucko. Anyhow, hope you've enjoyed it and hope that you will come back and check it out. We're still working on getting our website with the blog posts up and running. We want to do it right and make it not so confusing for people. We have a lot of things in the pipeline, so to speak. We will be doing a podcast on football. Yes, the great American sport. We're going to be checking that out, and we're going to have to actually do that in two parts because it is really involved. It's like everything else. Once we get into things, it explodes, and there's so much more information, which is kind of cool. I enjoy learning all these things, actually. We're doing that one. And what's another one we have in the pipeline?
We're also doing the jongleurs, the medieval street musicians.
Yeah, that's near and dear to my heart.
And in my case, ultimately, this is a ways off, but various peace attempts to end the Vietnam War. It's a little pet project of mine for a number of reasons.
We have interesting things coming up. Would like to ask you to give us a like and subscribe. And, we love hearing from you. So making comments is great. Do that if you wish. And hey, click the reminder bell so that you will be reminded of coming things when they're published. So eat your dinner and hey, use your necessary paper.
I bet you never thought in your life you would know more about toilet paper than you will after this podcast, folks. But that life and history are like that.
You got that one right. Hey, listen, we'll let you go for now and, have a good day. Come back and see us, man. All right.
So long, folks.